I've come to realize a lot of people drink not because they love alcohol, but because they're exhausted. And I mean really exhausted. Not just tired from a long week. I mean carrying everything alone exhausted. The business, the pressure, the marriage, the expectations that seem to multiply the more successful you become. And without even realizing it, we start telling ourselves that this is just how it is, that we're supposed to handle it. So when the pressure builds, we do what makes sense in the moment. A drink at the end of the day. It's a distraction. It's something to take the edge off. And honestly, I get it because life does get heavy. But here's the question I keep coming back to. What if stress isn't actually the real issue? What if the deeper thing going on is this? We were never meant to carry all of this by ourselves in the first place. That's what I want to talk about today. Hang in there. This is going to be an episode you don't want to miss. Welcome to Beyond the Gray, the podcast about gray area drinking and how it impacts your health, relationships, purpose, and faith. This is where we have real conversations about the topics successful men over 50 don't usually talk about out loud. If you've built a great life but keep asking, is this it? You're not alone. When alcohol becomes your go-to off switch and your marriage, health, or purpose feel disconnected, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Kari Schwear, and this, my friend, is where the gray ends. Hi, welcome back to Beyond the Gray. I'm Kari, and I'm so glad you're here for this one because today's episode is a little different from what we've been doing. Today, we're talking about something that lives underneath a lot of the gray areas that we've already explored together. We're going to be talking about faith. And before you check out on me, I want to be really clear up front. This is not a religious conversation. As a matter of fact, I don't even like the word religion. I'm not here to push doctrine on you or tell you what to believe. What I am here to do is talk about something I think is deeply, profoundly human, and that's connection. After working with people for years and really sitting with them in their stuff, one thing has become impossible to ignore. When people feel lost or stuck or just restless, even when their lives look pretty good from the outside, there's almost always a deeper disconnect happening. And it tends to show up in the same place every time. I work with clients around what I call the core four areas of life that shape everything: our body, our being, our balance, and our business. Our body is your physical health. Balance is your relationships. Business is your work and your purpose and your contribution to the world. But the one thing that holds everything together, that's being. It's your internal world, your sense of who you are, your connection to your creator. And that's what we're going to dig into today. By the time we're done, I want you to understand why so many successful people still walk around feeling unsettled. I want you to see how some of the hardest seasons of life might actually be doing something in you, not to you. And I want you to maybe see faith not as religion, not as a set of rules, not as something that your parents told you had to believe in, but as an invitation to stop carrying everything alone. So if this isn't your usual territory, I'm just asking you to hang in there with me and stay with me to the end, because I believe that something is going to land differently for you than you may expect. A former client recently sent me a video about something called the Pike experiment, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. This is so relatable to our own lives. So if you haven't heard it, let me tell you what it is. Scientists place a large pike fish in a tank, and on the other side of that tank were small fish, the exact kind that the pike would normally eat. But between them, the scientists put a clear piece of glass. So every time the pike went after those smaller fish, it would slam itself into the glass. again and again and again. And that fish became bloody and it was in pain. And eventually it figured out it can't get to the fish. So it stopped trying. And here's where it gets really interesting. The scientists later removed that glass completely. The barrier was gone, but the pikefish never attacked those small fish again. It just swam around them like they weren't even food anymore. Because even though the wall had disappeared, the belief that it was still there hadn't. And I think about that a lot when it comes to faith, because so many people hit a glass wall somewhere in their story, whether it's a bad experience, a deep disappointment, a prayer that felt like it went unanswered, or church hurt from someone, or they just stopped reaching altogether. And even years later, when that barrier is long gone, the belief that it's still there keeps them from reconnecting to something that could genuinely change things. There's another piece to this, though, and it starts when we're about 2 years old. Every parent knows this moment, and if you're a parent, I'm sure you'll remember this as well. It's when you try to help your toddler with something, and they pull back, and they say, "Me do it. I do it." And honestly, it's really adorable when you're 2. That independence, that little spark, we laugh and we love it because it's really cute. But something funny happens. A lot of us never fully outgrow that instinct, especially high performers, especially leaders. We get really generally good at solving problems, handling pressure, carrying the responsibility that we have, and it works for a while. But then there's a ceiling to how long any of us can carry everything on our own before it starts to cost us something. There's a story in the Bible that I keep coming back to as well, and it's the story of Jacob wrestling with God. It's one of those passages that actually stopped me the first time I really sat with it, because it's not a comfortable, tidy little fun story. It's quite the opposite. Jacob literally wrestles through the night with an angel of the Lord. It's a real struggle, and it's exhausting. And when it's over, Jacob walks away changed, not perfect, but different. He was marked by the experience itself. What's interesting is that even Jordan Peterson, and not someone you would exactly peg as a Sunday school teacher, recently wrote a book about wrestling with God, because that tension, that spiritual struggle, seems to be something a lot of us go through, whether we have a name for it or not. And I think life does something similar to us. It wrestles with us through hard seasons, through loss, through pressure, and it just won't quit. And sometimes I think the wrestling itself is doing something. It's not punishing us. It's truly shaping us. You know, another story to really kind of land that is Michelangelo. He was once asked how he knew what the statue of David looked like inside that enormous block of marble. And what he said was so simple and so profound. He said, "I just removed everything that isn't David." The masterpiece was already there. His job was to chip away everything that didn't belong. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because sometimes I wonder if that's exactly what life is doing to us in our hardest seasons, removing things that don't belong. Our ego, our need to control, our stubborn belief that if we can just manage everything tightly enough, it will all work out fine. Our exhausting insistence that we have to do this alone. And I want to ask you something personal, if I may. When was the last time you prayed? Not out of habit, not before a meal or at a church service. Just you, alone and honest, maybe even a little desperate. When was the last time you got quiet enough to say something like, "God, I don't actually know what I'm doing here. I'm so tired and I need help." For a lot of people, That's been a really long time. And I can't help but think about Jesus saying this in Matthew chapter 11. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I've read that verse 100+ times, and it hits me completely different when you're exhausted for years and nobody ever gave you permission to put things down. You don't have to keep carrying it all. You actually really don't. I want to share a morning that I had recently. Well, it wasn't that recent. It was a couple years ago with Rob, and it was something I'll just never forget. Rob has a lot of responsibility, a lot of people he's responsible for, and a lot of going on in business for him. He was getting ready to go to work. It was pretty early in the morning, and I could feel this tension coming off of him. I knew something was wrong, so I asked him what was going on. And he responded with, "Just a lot, stress and pressure. It's just all of it. Kari, the same thing." And I said something pretty simple to him. I said, "Well, why don't you just pray about it?" He turned around and he stopped and he looked at me. And what he said next kind of really broke my heart. He said, "God doesn't have time for my problems, Kari. He's got bigger things to worry about." I think about how many people really believe that God is only reserved for the big dramatic moments in our life, the crises and the disasters, and that the everyday grinding weight of life is somehow beneath his notice. But that's not how any real relationships work, is it? You don't only show up for the big things with the people you love. And God's invitation isn't just for your worst moments. It's for all of them, the big things and the small things, the stuff that feels important enough to bring and the stuff you're embarrassed to admit is weighing on you. So I asked Rob that day. I asked him, I said, "Rob, don't you believe that God cares about your stress and all the little things and the big things that you're dealing with right now? Give it to him. Give it to him on your way to work and see what happens." And so he did. And guess what? His day got a whole lot better. In John 15, Jesus says something that I find myself coming back again and again. He says, "I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit." Connection matters. That's what he's saying here. When a branch gets cut from the vine, it doesn't die dramatically. It slowly dries out. And I think a lot of people are living disconnected and they don't even have language for why everything feels a little dry. But guess what? The flip side of that is also true. When we reconnect, things start to shift. Peace that felt impossibly out of reach starts to return. Clarity comes back, and a sense of direction starts to emerge, not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you're not carrying it alone anymore. I want to be clear about something. This episode isn't about convincing you of anything. I'm not trying to get you to believe anything that you're not ready for or some specific belief system. I'm extending an invitation for you today to consider the possibility that the peace that you've been looking for, the thing that you've been striving for, the thing that achieving more hasn't quite delivered, that staying busy hasn't fixed, that drink that isn't fulfilling you, might actually be found in reconnecting with the one who made you. And if you're still sitting with some gray areas right now that feel muddy or confusing, sometimes the most powerful first step is getting clarity on where you actually are. That's exactly why I created the Gray Area Insights experience. It includes a behavioral scan and 2 deep sessions where we walk through all 4 of those areas: a body, being, balance, and business. Because when one of those areas starts to align, everything else shifts too. You can find the link in the show notes. And if something stirred in you during this episode, even something small, even something you're not sure what to do with, please don't ignore that. Sometimes the wrestling we do in our hardest seasons isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's the beginning of something being made right. Because when you stop carrying it all alone, when you finally reconnect to the one who made you, that's when you discover that there really is life beyond the gray. Next week, Rob and I are back together having a conversation that I think a lot of couples need to hear. What happens when you look across the table and realize you love this person, sure, but you're not actually liking them anymore? We're talking about what it really looks like when a marriage feels out of sync, and more importantly, how you can start rebuilding it. One more gray area that we get to look at together. I hope you'll be there. Be sure to share this episode, like, and follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes. I'm really glad that you stuck all the way with me to the end, and I really hope this episode blessed you immensely. Have a great day.